But some of the biggest risks that I have with this is when you have a client that has a client and they get access, or a contractor that gets access to all your back end scripts or things like that. And then they just go out and they start their own business competing against you. And they go back and they start contacting all your clients.
One of the main promotions that the FTC focused on in the CID was a promotion we did with another celebrity brand. I don't want to mention their name, but here's the irony of it. When they mentioned it, I remember calling the attorney. It wasn't Greg at that time. And I said, that's outside the 3-year window they're allowed. I did not promote that in this window. So that has to be removed. All right, welcome back to the episode. Here's the question for you today. Are you saving all your emails? Do you have emails from like years ago? Calls, customer information, customer data? What about your Slack chats, text messages? What about all of your assets that you use in marketing, such as your ads and your sales pages and all of that? So if you are saving too much of your customers' confidential data for too long, guess what? There's a little organization that you've gotten used to hearing about called the FTC. Could come knocking down your door. We've talked a lot about something called a document retention policy. I can't believe I went over a decade of having had legal counsel in the compliance world and had never heard of the term document retention policy. Well, now I hear about it all the time because Greg, that's one of the first things that he does with his clients is put this in place. And it's not about some form of tricky way to get around the FTC or anything like that. No. This is about true legal protection. This is about protecting your customers. And this is about actually getting sued if you don't have one. Opening yourself up to liability and getting sued. And that is the lesson that we can learn from Marriott. Marriott had, not recently, but a few years ago bought out an organization known as Starwood. Starwood, is that right, Greg?
Starwood, yeah.
Starwood, right. There came one and, let's just say Starwood had a little problem and Marriott inherited it and it became Marriott's problem. So the FTC just settled with Marriott as of the time that we're filming this, which is on Thursday of last week, from the time you're listening. I think for what, $56 million? Is that correct, Greg?
It was over 50 million.
It was a huge number.
Settlement.
So we're going to let Greg tee it up and tell us what it is that we can take away as business owners from this case, albeit we may not be Marriott and run 7,000 hotels. There is definitely something to take away from this. So Greg, what's going on? What happened? This isn't our typical advertising violation, but it's another one really, really relevant to our clients. What do you think?
I always emphasize when I look at trying to protect a client and a company, I don't just look at what the lay down advertising things are out there. I look across the board of what's out there. And I read the release yesterday. I read the case. So what stuck out of me in the release was two big things. First, they said, if you merge with another company that has done something that's incorrect, you assume that responsibility. And that's what it says in the release. You don't just take the benefit, you also take the detriment. So if you're Marriott and you buy Starwood, which is Sheraton hotels, if you're wondering what those are, and when they bought them, they had all the risk of exposure to the data breach that they had because they didn't collect data correctly, financial data that was actually hacked into. If you do that, you take the liability. So one big lesson from that, and I hear this all the time, if you want to merge or purchase another marketing agency, the network or whatever it is, you go to look to purchase those, you better do your due diligence that they've done things correctly as it pertains to marketing practices. If you go ahead and you buy into them and you haven't done the due diligence and they've done something wrong, you buy that to hell. It comes with you now. You may have never had an issue before because your marketing practices were good, but now you don't. You step right into that. So one big takeaway from the Marriott case that does apply across the board is that. The second big takeaway I took from that case was this. Why did they have all that data? They had that data because Marriott, when they bought Starwood, either Starwood didn't have good documentation policies or Marriott didn't. They held on to consumer data, which included names, contacts, and phone numbers, too long. They could kept that in a system that wasn't secure. They didn't have that in place. So if you read the press release, one of the things that the FTC chides Marriott and Starwood for not doing was getting and purging information periodically. So pull this back. I had a conversation this week about document retention policies with the marketing client. They said, "Well, isn't that funny? Like, if you do this, if we get rid of data, doesn't that just look like we're trying to destroy evidence?" I'm like, "No, it's under the standard course of business. Look at Marriott, and that the FTC is saying destroy data, get rid of things, don't retain it on there. If you do it as a manner and mode of your ordinary course of business and an ordinary standard operating procedure (SOP), and you're getting rid of things, systematically, then nobody can argue that you're doing it to try to destroy evidence because that's not really why you're doing it. What you're doing it for is to be able to limit potential risk. That risk could be that you had one rogue marketer that got on a telephone call back in the day and they said something that you didn't catch, but you go back later on and somebody looking through the poo in the weeds finds it. And it's like, okay, for Marriott, it was in Starwood, it was keeping consumer data too long. So document retention policies are essential across the boards and they're justifiable. I mean, the FTC expects you to have one. So why not have it in standard and just get rid of things over time? Periodically, just purge things, protect your business for privacy reasons.
Yeah, and I'll say this, right? So imagine, in my case, we had to turn over 16,000 sales call recordings that went back years. They have zero purpose to be on our systems. And what's worse is those calls are on a third-party system that we don't even know how secure it is or isn't. So God forbid they get hacked. Now think about this. Those sales calls are long 30, 45-minute intimate conversations between a salesperson and someone else talking about their life, their financials, their situations, their husbands, their wives, their kids, their losses, their wins, their fears. I mean, that's private, deep private stuff. And those calls were sitting on a server. So first and foremost, God forbid that server had been hacked or whatever, those calls pulled out, released. We would be hearing from the FTC for a very different reason, for having breached privacy and released all these things. And again, like I said, what is the likelihood that we're going back to listen to, audit, or even care about a call that took place 3 years ago, especially a call that didn't even lead to a sale? What the hell is the point of having it around? The sales agent who did that call probably not.
Yeah.
What's that?
Or a webinar or
Yeah.
an old VSL that you're not using anymore. You just forget about it. Yeah.
Yeah. What's the point, right? Like, why do you even have it? In my case, one of the main promotions that the FTC focused on in the CID was a promotion we did with another celebrity brand. I don't want to mention their name, but here's the irony of it. When they mentioned it, I remember calling the attorney. It wasn't Greg at that time. And I said, that's outside the 3-year window they're allowed. I did not promote that in this window. So that has to be removed. And he was like, well, that's interesting. They don't usually make mistakes like that. So let's get them on the horn and see if we can get it removed. And boom, they sent us a link to a page that had the replay of the webinar on it, live, still there. Now, again, promo's done. We haven't. And over the course of the last 3 years, we had sold exactly 7 units. We don't even know how. Other people found it too. It wasn't just the FTC. So, and I didn't even want, it was a live class. It's not supposed to be bought after. That product was a live class. It was delivered and done over with. And so I reach out and it was just someone on my team, right? They were in our LMS. You upload the course. That program was accessed from within our LMS. And so every product has a sales page and they were doing their job. They were like, oh, hey, we put the sales webinar on there. So anyways, here we go, right? Had we had a policy in place to catch that, we would have not only caught something that could have limited our risk and exposure at the FTC, but we would have caught something that shouldn't be up and running anyways. We would have caught something that, hey, like, don't be selling this thing right now. But those sales calls, that always gives me sweats thinking, man, that was one bullet dodged, but another one delivered, because now I have to turn all those calls over. And there's no point. There's zero purpose. Actually, post 30 days, 45 days, I have no idea what we're using it for, because we're not looking at it. We're not reviewing it. Get rid of it, right? It's just extra exposure, and it's server cost for what it's worth. We were paying a lot of money at the company and didn't even realize it. Paying thousands a month because of our storage space. So it's pretty crazy. Greg, let's talk about what a document retention policy is, how do you get it put in place. First and foremost, if you want the most bare bone basic version of it, right, a template that you don't have to work with an attorney on, come join us inside the Compliant Academy. So just go to the URL, it's below, right? You can grab the book. You can join us at compliantacademy.com. And we give you 33 different legal documents, disclosures, and contracts and things that you need that are written by Guardian Law, by Greg, that you can use as a baseline. They aren't fully done, and we highly recommend that you do get them personalized with Guardian Law. Work with them, hire them, engage with them for an hour or few hours and get that thing personalized. But there is something in there that we talk about and give you a sample document retention policy. But yeah, Greg, like how does this work? Is it a document, you work on it with an attorney, and then what is it, every month the company has a period of time that they kind of flush everything out? Can you talk a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah, so a document retention policy in most of my clients, the way they do it is in two ways. They have some sort of employee handbook they do for employees, so they agree when they sign that they're going to abide by the terms of the company. And number two, they have a contractor agreement for contractors. And embedded in that contractor agreement is a document retention policy that says, hey, we have this proprietary information you're going to get access to. Sometimes it's client confidential information. You agree that you're not going to retain it when you leave employment or being a contractor. You agree that after a certain period of time, you're going to destroy this. You agree to allow us to periodically purge this from your records. So I know a lot of you listening to this may have some sort of contractors and employees that work for you. So how do you kind of gauge this? Well, you have them do that because but some of the biggest risks that I have with this is when you have a client that has a client and they get access, or a contractor that gets access to all your back end scripts or things like that, and then they just go out and they start their own business competing against you. And they go back and they start contacting all your clients. Well, if you just allow them to get access to your sales scripts and your former video, productions for webinars and VSLs, or your former recordings for your telephone calls, they just keep that and they have it. Plus, it becomes discoverable in a lawsuit if they still have it and you think it's not there. So what I do is I have it in that contractor agreement, have an employee handbook that says they agree to that, and then you have systems put in place that automatically goes in and sweeps that data. It just sweeps it out on a periodical basis. So if it's a sales call, they may every 60 days or so just come in and clean out that sales call. If you want to give it to a contractor to view, you give them a link that expires in 30, 60 days instead of giving them the download that they can save forever. So there's just certain things you can put into place to avoid several issues. One, your PCI compliance requires you to protect the data that you obtain from your client as it relates to sales transactions and credit card processing. So if you retain those calls and you've got credit card information on there and you don't secure those, that could be in violation. If you give content to third party and contractors or employees and they go and they use it for their own personal use, you could be in violation. If you don't securely protect the data like Marriott and Starwood did, you're going to be in violation. So having this document retention policy that you have your contractors sign when they sign up with you, or your employees sign when they are employed by you, then you got it in place. Then you can go out and you can purge that data and not have to worry about the exposure you could have for those various reasons that I just outlined right now. It's maybe one of the most essential documents you have. And I'm actually updating it now, doing a more comprehensive one for people who want a more comprehensive one. We've got the simple version that we have in the Compliance Academy, but I'm doing a more comprehensive one for other clients right now too. And it does cost a little bit more, but.
So Greg, what are the types of things that you recommend to clients to have them flush out every X number of days? Sales calls is one. What are some of the other things that should be removed as dictated by the document retention policy?
Well, I look at tax returns. I look at just business records. I look at emails. I look at Slacks and WhatsApps. And I know a lot of people, like back in the day, they're like, well, we're only going to communicate in Slack and WhatsApp because it's non-discoverable. And that's not true. I've spent, that, like it's discoverable. When he wants it, they get it.
Not only is it not true, it's very expensive. So check this out. You can't do it yourself. You have to hire a forensics company that's going
Right.
to charge you anywhere from $30,000 to $100,000. That's what we had to do. So we ended up spending a multiple six figures with a forensics company. Didn't even know this existed. Because how do you download all your G Suite emails? We had millions of emails, probably, I don't know, but like between all of our team members and all of that, for God knows how long. And so we had to hire them. They came in, and they're the only ones that can go in and they do this, and it takes forever. The more emails you have, the more they charge. And Slacks, they did it. By the way, even audio files on Slack come out because they listened to them and found something a little questionable on one of the audios and sent it to our attorney. So they went through the Slack communications. I think what they do is they have everything transcribed. It's all listed, and I think they do word searches or something because they found some very minutiae things. So Slack, all of it was exposed, right? And I had to pay tens of thousands of dollars to make that happen. Just FYI.
Yeah, so it can become extremely like the most expensive part of any lawsuit and any investigation is discovery. It's getting that information. So the least amount of information you have, the less you have to pay to acquire to provide it. And that's not just with a regulatory body like the FTC, but if it's a civil suit with either a class action suit or a consumer suit, the less information you have, because the defense is if it's part of the natural course of business, well, we just got rid of it, and we can show that. If you just go out there and you delete things because you don't want people to have it without a document retention policy, they're gonna claim you destroyed it on purpose. And there's a way through the court system. It's called expoliation. You don't have to remember what that term is. That basically the court can construe the evidence to be what the party that's suing you, the plaintiff, is saying. They said this. Well, they destroyed the evidence, so what I said must be true. And the court will say, yeah, okay, the evidence is gone. It doesn't contradict that, so it must be true. And you don't want to be put in that situation. So having procedures in place methodically, having things updated like that methodically, that allows you to set this up better.
Got it. Awesome. Okay, so document retention policy is something that most business now, is it habit? Just you recommend clients right from day one, so they don't even have a business, they're just getting started. Is that just a habit that they should be in all the way through when they have a bigger business?
Proper foundations, man. Privacy
Yeah.
policies, terms of service, document
So
retention
let me
policies,
the
all of that should be from the beginning.
the only part of the document retention policy that makes me uncomfortable is the emails part, because I'm like, I do use my emails. I search
You
back to past emails and stuff.
you
How
can
often do you have those deleted?
well, depends on you can do it by category, right? For all customer support emails, we get rid of them within a year, or because if you have a CRM, it kind of documents what those communications were anyway, so you don't need to keep the emails. Or for marketing, it's 6 months, or for executives, they have it for 2 years, or whatever. I wouldn't keep them past 3 years, but if you're wanting to do that, that's why you hire a law firm and you say, hey, I may want to have you review some emails that I may eventually keep under attorney-client privilege, but we get rid of the rest. It's a hard one for a lot of clients. That emails is probably the hardest. So you have to go, okay, would I rather have the emails or would I rather have them discoverable? And you could say we're going to get rid of all terminated partner emails within a year of the termination of that relationship. That way you're keeping things that are relevant, but you're getting rid of past. I mean, there's a lot of ways. You can be specific as possible on there.
Okay, got it.
So you can
Got it.
grab.
Yeah, that's a very interesting one. All right, so Greg, what kinds of attorneys are the right attorneys to help someone? So someone's watching this right now, they should be joining Compliant Academy and just using Guardian Law and going to guardianlaw.com. But let's say for some reason they're not. Maybe they don't like your tie, or they don't like, your private jet behind you, and they say, we need a different attorney. So in that situation, what kind of attorney is usually the right attorney to put a document retention policy in place?
Ask your attorney if they know what it is. Hey, do you
Okay.
know what a document?
That's true. If they know what it is, then they're the right attorney.
They're like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I would never do that. Well, that's a good indication that that's
All
not
right.
the law firm.
What about, can I do it myself? Can I go to LegalZoom and type in document retention policy and put it in place myself?
Well, you can do anything yourself, DOI, but if you want it done right, I mean, you should hire a professional to do it that understands how to do it. I mean, that's my
Yeah.
opinion. I mean,
All right. So
form for your business, how they're just going to give you a form you sign. They're not going to help give you advice or tell you why it's there or what to do.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. So what I was going to recommend everybody, the reason I would recommend making sure you work with someone like Greg, or at least his level of experience in the world of compliance and regulators, is what do you want to have on the retention policy? Like you just said, right? He answered my email question. So if we were on a private call, attorney-client privilege call, he'd say, well, what's the issue? What types of emails do you search for? What are you trying to save? Right? And from there, he would then write it in a way and then also help administer on a month-to-month basis to make sure like we're actually doing it. Because it's one thing to have the policy, it's another thing to like actually do it. But there's a lot of things, like I've called him before in our policy and said, hey, how long do I need to keep the sales calls? Right? And it's like there's no law around how long. So I'm like, great, I'll delete them tomorrow. Right? Like I'll just delete them the next day. Why do I need them? And he's like, well, hold on. There's reasons to have them around for X amount of time, and you don't
Or
want to,
if you take the credit card authorizations over the phone, the telemarketing sales rule requires you to hold on it for 24 months. So that's why I try to get my clients not to take authorizations of payment over the phone, do it on an e-commerce platform they send to the client. So that way you can get the authorization and it's not over the phone. Ways around things. If you know it, but if you go to an attorney like document retention policy, you're like, I have no idea what the TSR is or the TCPA is or whatever. And you just delete it. I don't care. Like whatever. They don't know. So
yeah, I mean, I can pretty much tell you that it's going to have to be someone who's got a compliance background. But again, I had an attorney for many years who does have a background in this and is in this world. And I'm not saying he didn't know what it is at all. I don't ever remember hearing the term. And I'm not even accusing him for not having told me. Maybe he did and I ignored it, but I don't remember hearing it. But I'll tell you this, when I started working with Greg, it's like every third day it would be like document retention policy. Like I remember it now. I don't forget it. All right. So your homework assignment, if you're listening to this podcast today, first and foremost, just make sure you've read the book, get the book. Number 2, join us in Compliant Academy. Go to compliantacademy.com. Number 3 is get a document retention policy in place. Book a call with Guardian Law. Personalize the one that we have inside of compliantacademy.com and get one in place and then start actually enacting it, because holding on to way too much data is dangerous. And it's not necessary. It's just one of those things where it's like you're being lazy. It's a very easy thing to do. It helps amongst many things, and it protects you as well. It has the added bonus benefit of regulatory protection for not being discoverable. So take it from a person who had to turn over 600,000 items to the regulators. 600,000, okay? Get a damn document retention policy in place. I mean it, seriously. All right, with that said, everybody, that's your homework. You actually have homework this time. And make sure if you want to run a scan of your website to see how you are scoring, we launched the free version, 5,000 words. You could get scanned right now. Go to complyly.com, COMPLILY.com. Type in your URL, or you can paste up to 5,000 words. We'll scan it, give you an idea. We'll give you a C score, compliance score. We won't show you all the violations. For that, you got to upgrade. And we also added the $100 a month plan now officially. You don't have to pay the annual, although there are some amazing benefits for that. So with that said, everybody, we'll see you on the next one. We learned a lot from Marriott. Don't let it happen to you. Protect the data. Delete the data you don't need. Keep systems clean, because there are many cases where the FTC goes after companies for privacy stuff. It's one of the biggest things that they regulate. We don't talk enough about it here, but we are today. With that said, if you want to be a giant, go compliant. When life pushes you, stand straight, smile, and push it the heck back. Thanks, Greg. And to the rest of you, we'll talk to you soon.